What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Skyrider Limited. I am Jesse. Today, on Minimum Equipment List, we're going to be talking a part two about lines, and you join me here in the uh, editing cave, also known as Skyrider Studios, also known as my little office corner of the house. Um, it's been very rainy here in New England, so we're inside today to talk. So I got a lot of questions after the first flying line video about cool. We talked about materials, and I talked a lot about looking at your manufacturer recommendation for picking your line length and weight. But when do you fly lighter lines or heavier lines, longer or shorter? So let's talk about what those different line weights can do for a kite and what the different lengths will do for a kite, and when you might want to venture beyond what the manufacturer recommends or choose a different set of lines for your kite for your style or situation. So, line weights at a basic sort of understanding are going to be used to prevent breakage, heavier lines for higher pull. But you can also use heavier lines for some other things. So, in lightest wind, we're going to normally use our lightest lines because the pull will be the least. However, some kites are designed around heavier lines. So, for example, kite related designs, Furies, were designed to have line drag that pulled the nose forward and spilled pressure from the sail to give the kite drive and decrease pull. So, where normally you would switch to a vent, for example, in higher wind on a kite like that, which is very large, a lot of sail area at say 14, 15 miles an hour. A team like Scratch Bunnies, who was the factory team with that kite, would fly the standard up to 18 miles an hour of wind. They'd just switch up to like 500-pound lines. That big, thick, heavy line creates drag and pulls the nose forward, and then again spills that sail pressure. The other end of the spectrum, very light kites could be affected by having too heavy of a line, pulling the nose forward and spilling the sail pressure you need for good presence and good drive. So you may want to consider going to lighter lines for that. Different kites are going to respond differently, and it has a lot to do with how the kite is bridled by the manufacturer. So keep that in mind, as you're choosing your line weights. As for length, personally, I tend to fly most on 20 to 25 meter lines or 40-meter lines. The 20 to 25s I do for a lot of fun and freestyling. 40 I use for demonstration performances generally, and the reason being that longer lines are going to give me a bigger window and more presence in the sky for that audience. But what those line lengths will also do is change the speed of the kite's reactions to your inputs. So longer lines are going to deaden a fast kite. For example, the Canvas Kite Designs Crux, we everybody's favorite two-lined axe murderer. Um, the kite is wild, and it's definitely built and born for that 20 to 25-meter length, where it's very fast and flippy and a lot of fun. But if you want to slow some of its reactions to your inputs, you can put it on longer lines, and that sort of delay that the longer lines build in, well, that'll slow down the kite. So if you're trying to learn tricks, shorter lines make things happen faster. Longer lines give you more time to work the mechanics of your input. This isn't saying that you should necessarily learn on longer lines, because when you shorten the lines, things happen faster, and you will be geared for one thing. Fly a variety of line lengths if your space allows it, and again, that's consideration number 3. What does your space allow? I fly in some places where I fly quad on 5 meters of line, because I'm in a very confined space. Urban spaces will use very short lines. Indoor lines are always pretty short because you have a ceiling to contend with. Not always, but most of the time. I think the longest I've ever flown on indoors was about 15, 18 feet, about 5 meters. Outdoors, I think the longest I've ever flown on was 150 feet, and that was flying a stack as part of a team train situation. Um, so considering your field length. And remember, if you're flying on 100-foot lines, you need 200 feet of field width minimum, and that means you'll just fit inside your lines. Realistically, I want to have maybe 50 feet to either side of me beyond the end of my lines so I can move in the field without having to worry about getting near an obstacle. Obviously, there are obstacles and then there are obstacles. Be aware of, your line length and how it takes you over people or animals. I had a discussion with some folks at a local beach earlier in the year where I ended up not flying very long because the kite looks like a predator to some animals, and they asked me very nicely if I would not be there. They were part of a conservation effort, so I wasn't there anymore. So those are obstacles, but they're obstacles that you want to be concerned about more for their safety than for yours or your kites. Then there are obstacles like trees and fences and power lines. Those are things you want to avoid flying around for a number of reasons. So just be aware of your surroundings and with your line length as well. So I hope that answers some of those questions. And like I said, this is our sort of part two to that first line video. As always, thank you so much for liking and subscribing and sharing. And if you have any more questions or follow-ups, please post them in the comments or send me a message. And I'd be happy to do an additional minimum equipment list on lines as people have more questions and want more answers. And thank you so much. And we will see you out there, Skyrider.